right. Where is this place? It's supposed to be up there on the 6th floor of a former shopping mall, which has been converted into a 40-bedroom, top-end webcam business. They're going to give me a tour.
For each of the room, we have a different design. So you're not going to have 2 rooms at the same in our studio.
I'm at Best Studios in Romania's capital, Bucharest, and this is the Rolls-Royce of the webcam industry, with acres of Italian marble floors, sumptuous furniture, and lots of young, enthusiastic university graduates on its books. Maria Borghina is the operations manager. Dressed in expensive silk blouse, hair cropped and bleached blonde, she's a former webcam woman herself.
We are a studio. We provide models the space from where they can stream online. We provide them the training and everything they need to be a good model online.
She explains that the girls are treated like stars, given tuition.
Now, sorry, I'm just going to pause it for a sec. I'm not clear, because as I understand it, Andrew and Tristan got out of running Webcam Girls years ago. They found the drama between the girls and the effort required, like the ROI to run the business, wasn't really worth it. So from what I understood from my conversations with him, they got out of the business. But the way that they're describing this conversation is this unit on the 6th story of this old shopping plaza with 40 rooms is still being run by him. Is that correct?
No. So what they're trying to say is they're going to a different webcam studio, which he's claiming is the Rolls-Royce of webcam studios. So this has no affiliation with the Tates. And so that's important, because look how he's framing it. Oh, it's amazing. You know, they train the women. It's a very brilliant business model. They give the kids women training. They provide a platform. It's marble floors and so on and so forth. So can you see how he's framing this entire business as something which is done in a brilliant manner? Now compare that to the way he's framing the way the Tates are doing the business very differently, because he doesn't know if the women are in good condition when it comes to Tate. And actually, based on the documents that we've released at the moment, there's been 0 allegations that the conditions were terrible. So from that, one can surmise that the conditions were good, and yet he's framing one is good and one is bad. In terms of your second point about the webcam, from the court documents, you're right. It doesn't seem like they're actually in trouble for webcam. It seems like they're actually in trouble for OnlyFans and TikTok.
Okay.
Helped with makeup and clothes, and that paying punters around the world log into their streams.
You have a free chat section where every member or guest of the site can see you and they have access to you. And then you have a private session where the members, they have to pay to see you and talk to you. So you are not allowed to show nudity at all. Then you have the freemium site where in free chat, they allow you to do whatever you want. You can be naked, you can use sexual toys. It depends on you, whatever you want to do.
The company takes around 10% of the women's earnings, though it's standard for studios to take up to 50%. Maria explains that great care.
Another important point. He says it's standard practice for studios to take 50%. And in the court documents, it states that the worst woman, so the worst claim is in terms of the proportion she receives, is the woman says, I received 50% and Andrew Tate received 25%. So she is receiving double of what Andrew Tate is receiving. So that is important, because this Rolls-Royce, or standard practice, what he calls, so not the Rolls-Royce, but the standard practice that what he calls standard practice is 50%. So how is that extortion? Why that's important is an important element of human trafficking, is that you're exploiting, or it's essentially modern day slavery. So the people are working on a slave contract. So how can it be that you're working on a slave contract when you're receiving 50% of the revenue, whilst Andrew Tate is receiving half of that, and he has to pay for whatever the normal business expenditure is?
Now the critics watching this will bark if I don't bring this up, but there's a video out there somewhere, I think, of a private educational course that he sold, where he states that he would tell the girls that it would be 50-50, but he needs them to fill out a form to withhold whatever it was, 20% taxes, so they would get 30, but he would never pay the taxes and throw the form in the garbage. How does that how do you think that that's going to affect his case?
Well, I think that's an important point you made, because what it is first of all, that's a very old video. So let's assume there's 2 possibilities. Either he did do that, or he was just saying it as bravado. And what people don't understand is, in terms of the bravado aspect, one has to understand that where he's come from. He's come from basically Luton, which is, and from a council estate, which if you were to provide a comparison to the United States is like a ghetto. So when people come from that kind of upbringing, you talk in this way, this kind of like gangster type way. Look, I'm a G, I'm a gangster, I made $1 trillion, you know, I'm giving that girl 30%, but really should be 50%. So there's a possibility that he was talking in that manner. But so that's one possibility. And one cannot be convicted on what you say online unless there's demonstrated evidence that you've done that. For example, if I say I killed Malcolm, but Malcolm's not dead, I'm not going to get convicted for killing him. It doesn't matter what I said online. But if I said I killed Malcolm and then Malcolm's actually dead, then you're like, well, you know what? This sounds like a confession. So him saying it, there has to actually be evidence that he's done it. So now looking at it, the evidence is suggesting he didn't do it. The evidence is saying actually he received half. So he received 25% and the women received 50%, as opposed to what that video is saying, where he received 70% and the women received 30%. That's the first point. The second point, that even in that video, he contradicts himself a few times. First, he says, I take all the money. So you can snip that out and make him look bad. In the same video, he says we get 50-50. And then later in the video, he says, oh, I gave her 30 because of tax reasons. So they're the 2 points that I think are quite important about that issue.
Okay.
Is taken when it comes to recruitment to make sure the women are under no pressure or being exploited.
If she doesn't feel comfortable, she can leave anytime. They don't have a contract here to keep them collaborating with us. She can leave anytime she wants. It's very strange because if you go to any webcam model in Romania, she will never tell you that she was feeling that fear and that she was coerced to stay in a studio. Never.
The same can't be said for Sophie, Tate's ex from the UK. She thought that she was going to be his girlfriend. She had no idea what actually lay in store.
He approached me on Facebook originally, completely out of the blue. It didn't ring any bells. But just right off the back, the way he spoke, the way he made me feel, he was very charming and he made himself seem very familiar. He made me feel very comfortable. There were no red flags at all in the beginning. He just took an interest in my day-to-day life, wanted to know what I was into, what made me happy. It was developing naturally.
Sophie says that he then asked her to join him in Romania. She'd never met him before, but it felt right to Sophie in that moment.
I was at a stage of my life where everything sort of felt a bit boring and a bit dull, and this idea of an adventure and then lifestyle, and this guy seemed so into me, and he's making me smile every day, and the idea just seemed attractive to me.
So Sophie came to Romania, and she ended up in Tate's weird meat factory home. All seemed fine.
So can you see, again, she's providing consent. She's saying, look, this guy, we started a relationship. I really liked him. And then I decided to move out. The presenter says, oh, Tate suggested it. Irrespective of who suggested it, she's completely been clear that it was her autonomous decision to move to Romania. So is that now the case that if 2 people are in love or they meet each other from different cities and one person moves and they don't like the relationship, you can then basically claim human trafficking? Because again, that's how they're framing it. So can you see how when you're framing these ideas, the ramifications of it? That's why I say you may not like Tate. You might not like the things he's done. You may not like the entire industry that he's part of. But when you're basically highlighting certain issues and framing them as trafficking or framing them as rape, you better be well damn sure that whatever principle you're using, that they're very well-defined principles. Because guess what? They always go after people you don't like first. And then they then use them principles to go after you.
Yeah, this is, let's carry on. Let's carry on with this.
At the start, he was quite charming, but then something strange happened.
Well, the first couple of days of being with him, he was as I expected him to be. And then I can't remember how long I was there for the first time. I think it was 4 or 5 days. It was quite a long time considering it was the first time we'd met, but he just disappeared in the middle of the night. He was in bed next to me and I heard him get up and I thought he's just gone to the bathroom, and he just didn't come back.
Sophie was in his house alone for days. The man she thought was her boyfriend had vanished. It was odd and, in hindsight, a little disturbing. But she had no idea that this was his MO, that he targeted women that he hoped would work in his expanding webcam empire, treating them like property.
Tate had devised his own...
So 2 points. First thing is, he disappears for 5 days. You move to a different country. If that doesn't ring alarm bells, what does? Like, if you've got an issue there, you could have left. Why didn't you leave? First point. Second point is this. she says that he treats women as property. She doesn't provide the data or evidence for this, but one can only surmise that she's referring to the interview with Piers Morgan, I assume. If she's referring to the interview with Piers Morgan, he's quite clear that what he means by that is not property in terms of an asset, but what he means is in a traditional family, whether it comes to the Judeo-Christian or Muslim, so the Abrahamic religions, there's this idea that when you get married, one pays a dowry to the family, and there's a contract that occurs, and then the woman becomes part of the man's family. So he explains that quite well and explains his reasoning for it, even if you may disagree. But what I will say is this: the reason why the West find that harder to believe is because in the West, they actually consider men the property of women. Because if you look at it, and I can just give the United Kingdom's example, in the United Kingdom, men are the property of women, because as soon as you get married to a woman, you're basically signing a deal to say there's a one-way monogamous relationship where a man isn't allowed to cheat. If he does, she will divorce him and she will take half of everything he's got. On the other hand, a woman doesn't sign the same agreement because she can be polygamous. She can cheat on him and there's no ramifications, because if she does, what will happen? The man then has a decision to make. Either he accepts it and allows a polygamous relationship to continue, or he says, this is unacceptable. If he says it's unacceptable, he divorces her, she takes half of everything he's got. So in the West, man is the property of woman, hence why they don't like that statement.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. We got a question here. Were the Tate still doing webcam work in 2022? I don't know if you caught it earlier, but I asked them about it during a podcast, and my understanding was they got out of the business years ago. I don't know if you've heard anything different.
Yeah, so according to the documents, they weren't doing webcam. It's actually OnlyFans and
OnlyFans.
TikTok.
Okay. All right, let's carry on here.
User's guide for how to recruit women into webcamming, which he shared on something called pickupartisttools.com, not a site I frequent. In it, Tate explains the secrets of how he targets.
Sorry, let me just pause that for a second because I looked up pickupartisttools.com. It's an affiliate site that links to a lot of different pickup artists, courses, and material. I don't believe that the Tates put their material there. I believe they have an affiliate code that's listed somewhere, and whoever runs the site posts the link to all these offers that they have out there. So I think they framed that unfairly.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well.
It's young, sometimes vulnerable women. Listen to this.
I don't mention webcam until after I've had sex with the girl. If you're on dates and you're trying to mention it and shit, it just doesn't work. It puts them off. I'd never do that. That's disgusting. I'm not a whore. It's just not gonna work.
Listen to what Sophie says happened when she finally flew in to Romania. There was no mention of webcamming when they talked on Facebook. She thought that this was about romance.
I didn't really think of, what could this really be about? And it didn't really cross my mind. So there was some naivety there, I guess, from my part.
And here's Tate again, teaching how to exert pressure on potential recruits.
Then you start mentioning things like, yeah, but you're always busy. You're always at work. You can come work for me.
A couple of times he'd said to me, oh, you should do it. You'd make a fortune, but you don't have to, if you don't want to. You don't have to do
Pause,
it.
please.
You can do nothing.
So 2 points. The first thing is, this is again people's incorrect understanding of how it works. They are trying to make it look like that this love of that boy method, or whatever you call it, is actually illegal in itself, but it's not, because this is a normal mechanism by which people start relationships. You provide, you demonstrate the best part of you, the woman demonstrates the best part of her, and then you decide to go in a relationship. It's only when you then apply this and it meets the standards of human trafficking, like I said previously, slavery, not being able to have free movement, and so on and so forth, then, and you meet all them conditions, does that apply, and then you apply to human trafficking. So it's people trying to incorrectly apply. And so people, I've seen it online where they're automatically like, guess what? This looks like Loverboy. He's guilty. No, that's just one aspect to use to then prove the greater aspect, which is human trafficking, and they fail to do that. And the second point is this. He says to her, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. That sounds like consent.
Yeah, they always had the option to leave, and they were getting paid. So how are they held against their will? That's the confusing part, right?
Yeah.
Make enough money.
As I said, you cannot try and approach girls to do webcam. So you don't want a girl who's in it for money. You want a girl who's in it to be with you.
But he was always reminding me that the option was there, and that kind of progressed into, well, if you love me, you would do it. If you care about me, you would do it, because, you know, this is my business and we can build something together and make all this money, and we can buy property and we can invest and we can build this thing together.
Now, Tate talks about closing the deal.
So just a quick one. We'll build it together. We'll make money together. We'll buy properties together. That is a business deal, a business transaction where two family members are part of a business. Family members in terms of because they have a relationship in this regard. So again, that demonstrates that it doesn't meet the standards of human trafficking once again.
He says you take the woman to a smart restaurant where a previously recruited webcammer will come along and help with the coercion. It starts with alcohol.
Martinis, 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 bang, threesome. Slam them both. The bottom bitch knows. This girl's like, okay, well, I'll try it. Put both girls on camera together the first day. Give them a bottle of vodka. The guys will send loads of money to get the girls drunk.
I think over time, just chipping away at me eventually led me to think,
pause, please.
Yeah, maybe he's right.
So can you see how they've played that clip to make Andrew Tate sound bad, which obviously it doesn't sound great. But the woman, in the women's story, there's no woman who talks to her. There's no bottom B who comes and talks to her and tries to convince her. So again, you see how they play in audios, but then her story doesn't match those audios.
Yeah, they don't line up.
Maybe I should be doing it. And I guess it depends on the individual girl, the tactics he uses. It depends on the situation, the road he will go down to get them to doing it.
That's how you recruit girls. Do not recruit girls any other way.
More than 1,000 miles away from Bucharest, in my car, in that motorway service station car park, Sophie had a lot of time to reflect on those years with Andrew Tate. She'd done modelling and pole dancing before working for Tate, so it was an industry that she'd been on the fringes of. But she'd been pulled in by Tate's promise of romance and had never planned to end up in the situation she found herself in.
Pause, please.
It's all...
So from my information, she was in the business, but let's just go with what she said. So she was a pole dancer. So, and she says it was an industry that she was on the fringes of. My argument is actually, if you're in a strip club and you're a pole dancer, you are in the sex industry and you're in it from a more physical interaction when it comes to men as opposed to being behind a camera.
We got a question here, or sorry, statement. The woman that woman was deluded in her own fantasy of a relationship and decided to take revenge when she realized her fantasy was nothing in reality and she couldn't face her delusions. Victim mindset. Look, you know, women always reserve the right to change their mind at any given time. And if you two become popular and famous and say controversial things in ways that aren't warm and fuzzy and covered in rainbows and butterflies, you too could be, you know, in Andrew Tate's type of scenario. So this is something that men need to pay attention to, you know, for being honest here.
Yeah, you need to be safe.
Manipulation, and there's an ulterior motive to everything he does. It's difficult for people to understand that haven't felt how manipulative he is, or other men can be, unless you've had an experience of that.
What she's described to Georgia appears to be a form of psychological coercion, which in the UK is called grooming, and in Romania has a different name, though it's just as serious.
What you're talking about is something that we call the Romeo trafficker or the lover boy technique.
Iona Bauer is from Romanian NGO e-Liberare that helps women who've been trafficked.
Victims will not necessarily self-identify as victims. They're always going to find explanations of why that is happening. However, you always have to follow the money. Who is profiting from there? Is the trafficker actually taking money that's being generated by that particular person?
We tend to think of human trafficking as forcing people across borders and keeping them against their will. But psychological coercion is also a form of this dirty business.
Human trafficking is actually hidden in plain sight. The chains that we maybe imagine, they're not always visible. A lot of times they're psychological. It might be the fact that they're so ashamed somebody's going to find out what has happened to them that they're literally stuck.
I went back to Pipera, the neighborhood where Tate's house is, because we'd had a tip-off. Nearby, in a row of...
So I did talk about the lover boy method, and I've already demonstrated why that's flawed. But look, again, another example. So they're saying it's psychological coercion. And then what do they mean by that? How do you know something is psychological coercion? Because in reality, when you look at the information that's being presented, it's merely a guy and a girl who liked each other. The girl came over to Romania and there was some kind of relationship. There was a possibility of webcam, or she did do it for a short period of time. How was that coercion? Like that, it just does not meet the requirements. And why that's a concern, once again, is I don't want, I keep talking about it, but look, we do live in a world, a man-hating world, where men's problems are completely ignored. And so now you're having a scenario where a man can be taken out for the minimalist reason, because you can literally just say, he psychologically manipulated me, and you can basically accuse him of anything. And just to demonstrate that men hatred is so high is because, look, even this issue, rape, we know data completely shows that actually it's men who are raped more than women in the United States. And yet no one will ever tell you that. Men go through significant issues that women don't go through, but no one ever highlights it because we live in a world where nobody cares about men. And so this is another way of degrading men.
I know men that have been raped and nobody listens, nobody cares. It's how do you rape a man? I'll tell you the story one day offline when we're not running the camera, but women have done it. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pinned down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.